الشيطان الرجيم. بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم. الحمد لله رب العالمين بارئ الخلائق أجمعين باعث الأنبياء والمرسلين، ثم الصلاة والسلام على خير خلقه العبد المؤيد والرسول المسدد حبيب إله العالمين أبي القاسم المصطفى محمد. اللهم صل على محمد وآل محمد وعلى أهل بيته الطيبين الطاهرين وصحابته المنتجبين. صلى الله عليك يا رسول الله، صلى الله عليك يا سيدي ويا مولاي يا أبا عبد الله، يا رحمة الله الواسعة ويا باب نجاة الأمة ويا عبرة كل مؤمن ومؤمنة يا مظلوم يا شهيد يا غريب كربلاء، يا ليتنا يا ليتنا كنا معكم سادتي فنفوز فوزا عظيما. أعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم. بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم. يا أيها الذين آمنوا لا تتخذوا اليهود والنصارى أولياء بعضهم أولياء بعض ومن يتولهم منكم فإنه منهم إن الله لا يهدي القوم الظالمين. صلوا على محمد وآل محمد.
اللهم صل على محمد وآل محمد.
Second, for the love of Imams al-Hassan wal-Husain. For the love of Fatima al-Zahra with your loudest voices.
Allahumma salli ala Muhammad wa ali Muhammad.
As millions of followers of Ahlul Bayt gather all across the world to commemorate the martyrdom of Sayyid al-Shuhada, Imam Hussein, salawatullahi wa salamuhu alayhi, as we commemorate this sad event and we uphold our banners and we dress in black and we gather to mourn an event that inspires and motivates and inspires millions of people, and it motivates million others for the principles and values that the martyrdom of Imam Hussein stood for. At the same time, where the followers of Ahlul Bayt commemorate the death of Imam Hussein, there are millions of others who uphold the banners of joy and happiness and declare the day of Ashurss to be a day of joy and celebration, a day of happiness. And you have some people that are confused, that remain in the middle. They don't know whether the day of Ashurss is a day of sadness and mourning, as the followers of Ahlul Bayt say? Or is it a day of happiness, a day of joy, as others say? And you see the two camps. There's a rivalry between the two camps during the first 10 days of Muharram. You will see, including North America and in Europe, you will see the followers of Ahlul Bayt, they will uphold posters. Even in the UK, I remember a year or 2 years ago in London and in Manchester, there are posters all across the city mourning the death of Imam Hussein alayhi salam. In fact, in London 2 years ago, a group of youth, they brought the quotes stated by Westerners such as Charles Dickens and others, what they have said about Imam Hussein. They put their pictures and their statement on a big posters and billboards all across the city of London. This was one way to attract non-Muslims to the message of Imam Hussein alayhi salam. In Manchester, you will see flags with the name of Imam Hussein alayhi salam everywhere. At the same time, you will see posters and billboards that say the death, that say the day of Ashura is a day of celebration, is a day of joy, is a day to be fasted. The day of Ashura is a day of fasting. Thus, what is the truth? Is the truth that the day of Ashura is a day of mourning and sadness and crying, or is it a day of celebration and joy and fasting? Tonight, my dear brothers and sisters, we'd like to examine this topic. The topic of fasting on the day of Ashura. Is it a reality or is it a fabricated myth? It's a bunch of fabrications. You will see starting from yesterday till the day of Ashura, there's a major campaign. There's a major campaign online, at universities, on Facebook, on Twitter. Wherever you go, there's a campaign advertising for the fasting of the day of Ashura. That he who fasts on the day of Ashura will receive such and such reward. Why is this campaign? Where did it come from? The idea of fasting on the day of Ashura, where did it come from? Tonight we'd like to take an academic approach and study the idea of fasting on the day of Ashura and study its origin, where it came from, where did these narrations came from. We'd like to study it objectively and academically and look at the Sunni sources and only the Sunni sources. We have nothing to do with the Shia sources. We'd like to look at the Sunni sources and see what do they say about fasting on the day of Ashura. Of course, we have to keep an open mind. There are some who have fasted on the day of Ashura all their life. Their entire life they've been fasting on the day of Ashura. Thus, if we reach a conclusion that it's a myth, for some people this is not easy to accept. That is why we say let's keep an open mind and let's try to accept the results based on the academic discussion that we will have tonight. The Quran says, فَبَشِّرْ عِبَادِ الَّذِينَ يَسْتَمِعُونَ الْقَوْلَ فَيَتَّبِعُونَ أَحْسَنَهُ. Give good news to our righteous servants, those who listen to the various opinions. فَبَشِّرْ عِبَادِ الَّذِينَ يَسْتَمِعُونَ الْقَوْلَ. Those who listen to the various opinions and to the various statements and choose the best. Choose the best opinion. Tonight we'll give all the opinions and we'll dissect and study the various opinions with the proof that they provide, and we shall choose the best of these opinions. When we look at the narrations of the fasting the day of Ashura in Sunni sources, we will see that these narrations are various. In fact, some of these narrations contradict each other. When you ask our Sunni brothers and sisters, why do you fast on the day of Ashura? They will mention various narrations. They will say that our sources have a lot of narrations, and these narrations are the basis of their belief in the fasting of Ashura. When we look at these narrations, we see that they contradict each other. There's discrepancy between these narrations. Let's look at these narrations and look at the contradictions. One of the narrations is narrated by Ibn Abbas, Abdullah ibn Abbas. He says, قدم النبي المدينة فرأى اليهود تصوم يوم عاشوراء فقال ما هذا؟ قالوا هذا يوم نجى الله بني إسرائيل من عدوهم فصاموا موسى. قال رسول الله قال فأنا أحق بموسى منكم فصامه وأمر بصيامه. This hadith says that Rasulullah sallallahu alayhi wa alayhi arrived to Medina on the day of Ashura. He arrived to Medina, migrated from Mecca to Medina. He arrived to Medina on the day of Ashura. And he found the Jews to be fasting on this day, on the day of Ashura. So he asked them, why are you fasting? They told him, this is the day that Allah rescued us, rescued Bani Israel from Fir'aun. He rescued us from the Pharaoh. And so we fast on this day because Musa alayhi salam also fasted on this day. Rasulullah told him, then if this is the case, then I am closer to Musa than you are. I am a prophet, and he is a prophet. I am closer to him than you are. So I shall fast on this day as well. What do we notice from this hadith? We notice, number one, keep in mind that Rasulullah arrived in Medina on which day? On the day of Ashura. Number two, he was told, he saw that the Jews are fasting. He did not know the reason. The Jews taught him the reason. They told him the reason why we are fasting is because Allah rescued Bani Israel from Fir'aun on this day. And so he decided to fast and follow the tradition of Musa and the Jews. This is one hadith. In another hadith, another narration mentioned in Bukhari, and the one who mentions this narration is Aisha. She says, كان يوم عاشوراء تصوم قريش في الجاهلية وكان رسول الله يصومه. The day of Ashura was fasted during the days of Jahiliyyah. Jahiliyyah were the days before Islam, the days of ignorance. And Rasulullah would also fast this day. فلما قدم المدينة صامه وأمر بصيامه. And when he came to Medina, he continued fasting the day of Ashura. And he ordered his companions to fast on the day of Ashura. فلما فرض رمضان ترك يوم عاشوراء فمن شاء صامه ومن شاء تركه. When Allah ordered Muslims to fast during Ramadan, Rasulullah stopped fasting on the day of Ashura. And he told his companions, those of you that wish to continue fasting on the day of Ashura, you may. And those of you that wish to stop, you may stop. What do you notice in this hadith? And what's different in this hadith than the former? This one, Rasulullah was fasting during the days of Mecca. When he came to Medina, he was already fasting on the day of Ashura. It was not new to him. While the first hadith tells us that Rasulullah didn't know anything about fasting on the day of Ashura. The Jews taught him. While according to this hadith, Rasulullah used to fast from the days of Mecca, from the days of Jahiliyyah. And he continued fasting on the day of Ashura until Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala prescribed the fasting of Ramadan. Up till that day, Rasulullah stopped fasting on the day of Ashura. This is new. This content did not exist in the first hadith regarding the fasting of the day of Ashura. Our third hadith by Muslim, in Sahih Muslim, narrated by Ibn Abbas, again by Abdullah ibn Abbas. He says, إن رسول الله حين صام يوم عاشوراء وأمر بصيامه قالوا يا رسول الله إنه يوم تعظمه اليهود والنصارى. Rasulullah in Medina fasted on the day of Ashura, and he told his companions to fast on the day of Ashura. They told him, Ya Rasulullah, this is a day that is honored and glorified by the Jews and Christians. Keep in mind, they said Christians. Who is telling this to Rasulullah, his companions? They told him, why are we fasting on this day? This is a day that is glorified and honored by the Jews and Christians. فقال رسول الله إذا كان العام المقبل إن شاء الله صمنا يوم التاسع. He told them, okay, if this is the case, then next year we will not fast on the 10th, we will fast on the 9th. فلم يأتي العام المقبل حتى توفي رسول الله. Ibn Abbas says, but next year, the year after that, Rasulullah died before the 9th of Muharram. He was not able to fast on the 9th of Muharram because he passed away. Now, according to this hadith, that when did Rasulullah start fasting on the day of Ashura and order his companions to fast on the day of Ashura? 1 year before his death. According to the former hadith, he began fasting which year? The year that he arrived to Medina. According to this hadith, he ordered his companions to fast on the day of Ashura 1 year before his death. The difference between the year of his arrival to Medina and the year before his death is almost 10 years. 10 years difference. You see the difference? Another difference, another discrepancy and contradiction is that Rasulullah did not meet the Jews and Christians. His companions told him that the Christians and Jews fast on this day and honor this day. Rasulullah told him, okay, then we shall not fast on the 10th. You see in this hadith, in this third hadith, Rasulullah tells them that next year we will fast on the 9th, meaning we will not fast on the 10th. Meaning, in a way, he was forbidding them from fasting on the 10th of Muharram, from fasting on Ashura. Rasulullah was in a way forbidding them, known as the discrepancy and contradiction. And a fourth hadith, Ibn Abbas, this is in Sahih Muslim. He narrates the hadith from al-Hakam ibn al-A'raj. Al-Hakam asks Ibn Abbas, he tells him, فَقُلْتُ أَخْبِرْنِي عَنْ صَوْمِ عَاشُورَاء. He says, I asked him, tell me about the fasting on the 10th of Muharram, on the day of Ashura. فقال, Ibn Abbas says, إِذَا رَأَيْتَ هِلَالَ الْمُحَرَّمِ فَأَعْدِدْ وَأَصْبِحْ يوم التاسع صائما. He told him, if you see the moon side. Al-Hakam asked Ibn Abbas about the fasting of Ashura. Ibn Abbas told him, if you see the moon of Muharram, count 9 days. 9, not 10. Count 9 days. And on the 9th day, fast that day. Meaning, which day? The 9th, not the 10th. Al-Hakam asks Ibn Abbas, he says, هَكَذَا كَانَ رَسُولُ اللَّهِ يَصُومُهُ؟ قال no. He tells him, is this how Rasulullah used to fast? He told him yes. Meaning on which day? The 9th, not the 10th. While the other ahadith, the first and second, they said that Rasulullah fasted on the 10th. The third and fourth hadith, in the third hadith, Rasulullah told them that next year we'll fast on the 9th, but he didn't live till that day, he died before. In the fourth narration, Ibn Abbas says that Rasulullah fasted on the 9th. You see the contradictions? You see the discrepancy between all of these narrations and these ahadith? Thus, on which hadith do we accept? Do we accept the first, or the second, or the third, or the fourth? Of course, there are over 20 narrations and ahadith regarding this subject, of fasting on Ashura. And all of them have these sort of contradictions, this discrepancy between them. So which one do we accept? When they contradict each other, which one do we accept? Which day did Rasulullah fast? According to these hadith, we don't know. Did he fast on the 9th? We don't know. Did he fast on the 10th? We don't know. Did the Jews and Christians teach him about the fasting of Ashura? Or was it a practice from the days of Jahiliyyah, from Mecca? We don't know, because the hadith mention both. Thus, these ahadith are full of contradictions. Furthermore, these narrations, they not only contradict themselves and contradict one another, they contradict the Quran, as we shall see. They contradict the well-established Sunnah of Rasulullah. They contradict historical facts, as we shall see. And they contradict logic and reason. Some of these narrations, as we saw, mention that Rasulullah sallallahu alayhi wa alihi arrived to Medina on the 10th of Muharram, on the day of Ashura. And he's found the Jews and Christians to be fasting, specifically the Jews. He asked them, why are you fasting? They told him, we are fasting because today was the day that Allah rescued Bani Israel from Pharaoh. This is one of the hadith. One of the hadith mentions this. Now, when we come to Judaism, when we study Judaism, we see that Jews fast on one day throughout the entire year. And that day is known as Yom Kippur. Yom Kippur is the day that Jews fast on. And they call Yom Kippur as the Day of Atonement. The day of seeking forgiveness. They believe that it was the day that Allah, or God, we don't call him Allah, it was the day that God forgave them for a major sin. Which sin was that? It was the sin of worshipping the golden calf. When Musa took his people to receive the second commandment, the Jews worshipped a golden calf. This was a great sin. When they repented and sought forgiveness from God, and God forgave them for the sin, that day was known as Yom Kippur. And to thank God for forgiving them for the sin, they fast on that day, the day of Yom Kippur. Now they believe that on Yom Kippur, on this day, God sets out their destinies and fate for an entire year. One full year. And Yom Kippur is the 10th day of the 7th month in the Hebrew calendar. The 7th month of the Hebrew calendar is called Tishri. The 10th day of the month of Tishri, which is the 7th month in the Hebrew calendar, not the first. Muharram is what? The first month in our calendar. Tishri is the 7th month. Yom Kippur is the 10th day of that day. That day is called Yom Kippur. Jews fast on that day for 25 hours from sunset till sunset. From the sunset of the 10th day till the sunset of the 11th day, for approximately 25 hours. And this day is called the Sabbath of all Sabbaths for the Jews. They refrain from eating, drinking, working, bathing, putting on perfume. They abstain from any form of physical pleasure, marital pleasure. And the central theme of Yom Kippur is seeking forgiveness and atonement, and seeking forgiveness from God. They consider it to be the holiest day throughout the entire year, very similar to Laylat al-Qadr that exists in our religion. Their Yom Kippur is extremely similar to Laylat al-Qadr. They come to their synagogues. All Jews come to the synagogue on that day, even the non-religious ones. Even those that do not attend at the synagogue for an entire year, you will find them at the synagogue on Yom Kippur. Very similar to Muslims. Those that you do not find throughout the entire year, you will find them on Laylat al-Qadr and the 10 nights of Muharram. They disappear throughout the entire year, but you find them during these two occasions, Muharram and Laylat al-Qadr. Jews have a similar issue. They attend, even the non-religious ones, they attend on Yom Kippur. The purpose of fasting for them is to feel the pain of the poor. Very similar to us, when we fast during the month of Ramadan, we feel the pain of the poor. Fasting for the Jews is required of healthy adults of ages 12 and up, and is waived in certain conditions. If there are health conditions, people that have health conditions, then they do not need to fast on Yom Kippur. They must have a very large meal one day before, before sunset on the 10th of the month of Tishri. They have to have a very large meal, very similar to suhoor. When we have suhoor, they also have to have a very large meal. Men, Jewish men, have to immerse in water for purification before fasting. And this is also similar to our ghusl janaba before fasting. This is called Yom Kippur, and this is the tradition of fasting for the Jews. The date of Yom Kippur on the Gregorian calendar, not the Hebrew. On the Hebrew calendar, it's in the 7th month, which is called Tishri, on the 10th day. As for the Gregorian calendar, it is always between September 14th and October 15th. Yom Kippur is always between these days, from the 14th of September till the 15th of October. By the way, Muslims and Christians, Muslims and Jews have a lot in common, especially our laws. We Muslims have more in common with Jews than we have with Christians. I remember once I was flying from Toronto to Los Angeles, and next to me on the plane was a Jewish rabbi. And it's a long flight, it's about a 5-hour or 6-hour flight. We talked about the differences and the similarities that we have in our religions, and we discovered that we have so much in common, Christians and Jews. This is one of them. However, the question is, does Yom Kippur, the day that Jews fast on, does it have any relevance to the day of Ashurss? No. It has absolutely no relevance. Yom Kippur for the Jews has absolutely no relevance with the day of Ashurss for us Muslims. Number one, the day of Ashura is the 10th of the first month for us, while for them it's the 10th day of the 7th month for them. This is one. Number two, according to the narrations that are found in Sunni sources, Jews fasted or fast on that day because God saved them from Pharaoh. While according to Jews, and the Jews of today, according to historical facts, Jews fast because God forgave them from worshipping the golden calf. It has nothing to do with saving them from Pharaoh. Number three, if Yom Kippur is similar to any of our events, is similar to Laylatul Qadr. It's not similar to the day of Ashura. If there are any similarities, the similarity is between Yom Kippur and Laylatul Qadr, because in both we believe that our destinies are set, our fate is set. It's a day of fasting, it's a day of special rituals and supplications. It's a night of, it's a day of seeking forgiveness and atonement. Thus, there's more relevance and similarities between Yom Kippur and Laylatul Qadr, not the day of Ashura. Thus, this is an important contradiction that we have to realize with the narrations that speak about fasting on the day of Ashura. Furthermore, some of these narrations mentioned that Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam arrived to Medina on the day of Ashura, correct? Well, according to historical facts, everyone knows that Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam did not arrive to Medina on the day of Ashura. In fact, not even in Muharram, Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam arrived to Medina in the month of Rabi' al-Awwal on the 8th of Rabi' al-Awwal. Both Sunnis and Shias. Al-Hakim al-Naysaburi, a well-known Sunni scholar, in his book al-Mustadrak, he says, أن النبي قدم المدينة في شهر ربيع الأول. Rasulullah arrived to Medina in Rabi' al-Awwal, not in al-Muharram. This is another contradiction and discrepancy. Furthermore, some of these narrations say that Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam arrived to Medina on the day of Ashura, and he saw that both Christians and Jews, Christians as well, are fasting. And this is a holiday for both Christians and Jews. When we study Christianity, we see that Christians have no event, have no holiday that coincides with the day of Ashura. In fact, Christians have two major holidays. Christmas, which is on December what? 25th. And Easter, which is on April 1st. They have no other holiday of major significance. They have no holiday that coincides with the day of Ashura. This is a contradiction as well. And Yom Kippur is observed only by Jews, not by Christians. Christians do not fast on Yom Kippur. Only Jews fast on Yom Kippur. And as we saw, Yom Kippur has nothing to do with Ashura. Let's play the devil's advocate. And let's say that Yom Kippur coincides with the day of Ashura. That Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam arrived to Medina. Let's play the devil's advocate and say that Rasulullah arrived to Medina on the day of Ashura and saw Jews fasting on the day of Ashura, and that Jews fast on the day of Ashura every year. Let's say this. Let's say that, for example, theoretically speaking, this is all correct. Rasulullah receives his legislation from Allah or from the Jews. Rasulullah learns his laws from Allah or from the Jews. Let's get this straight. Rasulullah learns everything from Allah. Allah legislates. Allah is the best legislator. He doesn't need the Jews to tell him what to do. Rasulullah doesn't need the Jews to tell him when to fast and how to fast and how to pray. None of this. Rasulullah learns everything from Allah. The Quran says, and I recite the verse that I began with. يَا أَيُّهَا الَّذِينَ آمَنُوا لَا تَتَّخِذُوا الْيَهُودَ وَالنَّصَارَى أَوْلِيَاءَ. All you who believe, do not take Jews and Christians as awliya. What does awliya mean? What does awliya mean? What does wali mean? Some say friends. Do not take Jews and Christians as friends. Is this what the Quran is saying? Don't befriend Jews and Christians? Absolutely not. And there are some illiterate, and I say illiterate, translators of the Quran. They translated awliya as friends. That is why some people, Americans, Canadians, Westerners, when they pick up the Quran, they say, see, the Quran teaches Muslims not to befriend Jews and Christians. The Quran says, awliya does not mean friends. Awliya does not mean friends. This is the same mistake that they made when interpreting Hadith al-Ghadir. When Rasulullah sallallahu alayhi wa stopped in Ghadir Khum and he raised the hand of Ali ibn Abi Talib and he said, Man kuntu mawla, Father Ali mawla. Sunni scholars say that mawla here means what? Friend. Mawla means friend. Rasulullah stopped in the middle of the desert along with 100,000 of his companions to say that Ali ibn Abi Talib is my friend? Who accepts this? Which logical person accepts such an interpretation? Awliya, my dear friends. Awliya means authorities. Authorities. Guardians. The Quran is saying, do not take Christians and Jews as authorities. Meaning, do not take your religion from Christians and Jews. We will give you your religion. Allah will teach your religion. You don't need to be taught about your religion from Christians and Jews. This is what it means. The same, when Rasulullah said, Man kuntu mawla, Father Ali mawla, means that Ali ibn Abi Talib, he whom I was his authority and guardian, Ali ibn Abi Talib is also his authority and guardian. This makes a lot more sense than to say, his friend. His friend doesn't make sense. Thus, Rasulullah learns about his faith and religion from Christians and Jews or from Allah. This is one. Number two, Rasulullah knew about Judaism and Christianity more than Jews and Christians. Rasulullah would teach Jews about Judaism. He would teach Christians about Christianity. He would not need them to teach him. Rasulullah would teach them about their own faith and religion. If Rasulullah needed their help, if Rasulullah learned from them, that means he was ignorant and they were more educated. This would prove his ignorance. Rasulullah was more educated than them regarding their own faith and their own religion. And number three, if, theoretically speaking, that the day of Ashurss coincides with Yom Kippur and that Jews and Christians fast on this day, on the day of Ashurss, does this mean that we have to fast on all of the Jewish and Christian holidays? Just because it's a holiday for Jews and Christians, does this mean that we should fast on all of the Jewish holidays and the Christian holidays? Should we fast on Christmas and on Easter and on Good Friday and all the other Rosh Hashanah and all the other Jewish and Christian holidays? Of course not. This doesn't make sense. Sallu ala Muhammad wa ala Muhammad. Allahumma salli ala Muhammad wa ala Muhammad. In some narrations, there is no mentioning of Christians and Jews. The hadith says that the people of Jahiliyyah during the days of before Islam, they would fast on the day of Ashurss. And Rasulullah would also fast. And when he came to Medina, he continued fasting on the day of Ashurss until Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala prescribed the fasting of Ramadan. When he prescribed the fasting of the month of Ramadan, Rasulullah stopped fasting on the day of Ashura. Now, this hadith, this contradicts the Quran. Why? Because when Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala introduces the month of Ramadan, He introduces the idea of fasting for the very first time. يَا أَيُّهَا الَّذِينَ آمَنُوا كُتِبَ عَلَيْكُمُ الصِّيَامُ كَمَا كُتِبَ عَلَى الَّذِينَ مِنْ قَبْلِكُمْ. When Allah ordered Muslims to fast on the month of Ramadan, in the month of Ramadan, He was introducing to them the concept of fasting for the very first time, as if Muslims did not know about fasting. Correct? Now, this hadith says that during the days of Jahiliyyah they would fast, and Rasulullah would fast, and the Muslims would fast, up until the month of Ramadan. This is a contradiction. The Quran is introducing fasting for the first time. It's as if Muslims did not know about fasting. You see the contradiction? And furthermore, this hadith says that fasting was part of the tradition of the days of Jahiliyyah. And Rasulullah continued fasting because there was a tradition of the Jahiliyyah. And now all this propaganda about fasting on the day of Ashura. Why? Because of the days of Jahiliyyah? Because people before Islam would fast. So now we should also fast the day of Ashura because it was fasted before Islam. We should follow the sunnah of the days of Jahiliyyah or the sunnah of Rasulullah. Which sunnah should we practice? The Quran says, أَفَبِحُكْمِ الْجَاهِلِيَّةِ يَبْغُونَ أَفَحُكْمَ الْجَاهِلِيَّةِ يَبْغُونَ وَمَنْ أَحْسَنُ مِنَ اللَّهِ حُكْمًا لِقَوْمٍ يُوقِنُونَ. You wish to follow the ruling of Jahiliyyah, the Quran says? Which rulings and sunnah do we wish to follow? The sunnah of the Jahiliyyah or the sunnah of Rasulullah sallallahu alayhi wa alayhi? Sallallahu ala Muhammad wa ala Muhammad. Furthermore, we see that in some of these narrations, Rasulullah specifically says you can, or it is ascribed to Rasulullah. We don't know if Rasulullah said it. And most likely Rasulullah did not even say this hadith. It is ascribed to Rasulullah that Rasulullah said you can either fast on Ashura or you could stop. He didn't say it's recommended. In a hadith in Bukhari, narrated by Aisha, فَلَمَّا فَرَضَ اللَّهُ رَمَضَانَ قَالَ رَسُولُ اللَّهِ مَنْ شَاءَ أَنْ يَصُومَهُ فَلْيَصُمْهُ وَمَنْ شَاءَ أَنْ يَتْرُكْهُ فَلْيَتْرُكْهُ. When Allah prescribed Ramadan, He told them, listen, as for Ashura, those who wish to fast, they may, and those who wish to stop, they may stop. Does it say anything about being recommended and that it's highly recommended? No. So why is it that today we see a major campaign telling us to fast on the day of Ashura, online and at universities and on social networks? Wherever you go, you are told that you should fast on the day of Ashura and that it's highly recommended. These narrations, some of them, they say that Rasulullah said, you can fast and you cannot fast. There's no mentioning of being highly recommended in some of these narrations. In other narrations, and we are examining the content of these narrations, we like to see, do they make sense or they don't make sense. Should we accept these narrations or not? Is the fasting of Ashura myth or reality? According to some of these narrations, that he who fasts on the day of Ashura, Allah will forgive his sins for an entire year. For an entire year, Allah will forgive his past sins the prior year. عن أبي قتادة قال رسول الله صيام عاشوراء صيام يوم عاشوراء أحتسب على الله أن يكفر السنة التي قبله. Supposedly Rasulullah said that if I fast on the day of Ashura, Allah will forgive for me my sins of the past year. Who accepts this? Who accepts this? That by fasting for one day, Allah will forgive the sins of an entire year? That means you can do whatever you want. You can drink alcohol and sell alcohol and accept interest and gamble and fornicate and commit adultery and perform all of the sins that you'd like. But on the day of Ashura, come and fast, and Allah will forgive all of these sins. Who accepts this? Which logical mind, which person with any reason who knows Islam and the spirit of Islam would accept this? Furthermore, their narrations and Sunni narrations, Sunni sources, they mention the day of Ashura, fasting on the day of Ashura, and they mention the fasting on the day of Arafah as well. The day of Arafah, it's mentioned in their narrations. In fact, some of their narrations mention that if you fast on the day of Ashura, your sins for 1 year will be forgiven, the past year. But if you fast on the day of Arafah, which day is the day of Arafah? The 9th of Dhul Hijjah. The 9th of Dhul Hijjah. If you fast on the day of Arafah, Allah will forgive 2 years for you. 2 years. The past year and the future year. The year that will come. Thus, according to these narrations, which day is greater? The day of Ashura or the day of Arafah? The day of Arafah. But do you see anyone making campaign about fasting on the day of Arafah? The day of Arafah passed 1 month ago. Did you ever hear of anyone making a big deal online or at universities or major campaigns about fasting on the day of Arafah? Did you hear? No. Even though according to their narrations, fasting on the day of Arafah is greater than fasting on the day of Ashura. But they don't make a big deal out of it. You know why? You know why they don't make a big deal out of fasting on the day of Arafah? Because Imam Hussein was not killed on the day of Arafah. He was killed on the day of Ashura. You see, my dear friends, when we come to the real reason, we saw the contradictions, and we saw the discrepancy, and we saw that any person with reason and with logic cannot accept the fasting on the day of Ashura, and cannot say that it is recommended, and cannot say that it was practiced by Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam. So why? Why do we see every year, and you will notice, why do we notice that every year they make a big deal about fasting on the day of Ashura? They make a huge campaign. Whether it's back in the Middle East, or here in the West, in the UK, in the United States, and Canada, they make a huge fuss and a huge campaign about fasting on the day of Ashura. Why? The reason, my dear friends, is because Imam Hussein was killed on this day. Because this was a day of joy and happiness for Bani Umayyah and for Yazid and Ibn Ziyad. It was a day of joy. It was a day of happiness. It was a day that Bani Umayyah sought vengeance and revenge from Bani Hashim. Because Amir al-Mu'mineen alayhi salam had killed the patriarchs of Bani Umayyah at Badr, at Ashura they sought vengeance from Ali ibn Abi Talib by killing his son, Imam Hussein alayhi salam. This is the reason why they fought Ashura. Because for them it was a day of happiness. They had killed the son of Ali ibn Abi Talib. That is why when the head of Imam Hussein alayhi salam was brought in the court and in the palace of Yazid, Yazid began reciting ليت أشياخي ببدر شهدوا جزع الخزرج من وقع الأسل لأهلوا واستهلوا فرحا ثم قالوا يا يزيد لا تشل. Yazid, when he saw the head of Imam Hussein, he said, I wish that my forefathers from Badr were here to see me seek vengeance and revenge for their death. You see, it was a day of vengeance for them. That is why they celebrate on the day of Ashura. Imam Rada alayhi salam was asked about fasting on the day of Ashura. He said, عن صوم ابن مرجان تسألني ذلك اليوم صامه الأدعياء من آل زياد لقتل الحسين. Imam Rada was asked about the fasting on the day of Ashura. He said, you asked me about the fasting of Ibn Ziyad, the day that Ubaydullah ibn Ziyad fasted and his followers fasted on that day for the killing of Imam Hussein. Imam in another hadith was asked about the fasting of Ashura. He said, this is a day of sadness. This is a day of agony and pain. It is not a day of joy and celebration. However, they needed an excuse. Bani Umayyah needed an excuse to celebrate on this day, so they fabricated ahadith and narrations saying that this was a holiday for Jews and Christians, and it is the day that Allah saved Bani Umayyah, and He saved Bani Israel from Fir'aun. These are all fabrications, my dear friends. They needed an excuse to celebrate on this day, so they fabricated these narrations. In fact, according to Sunni narrations and Sunni sources, that the day of Ashura is a day of sadness. It's a day of mourning. It's not a day of happiness. Musnad Ahmad, he mentions a narration by Ibn Abbas. He says, Ibn Abbas says, that I saw Rasulullah sallallahu alayhi wa sallam in my dream, and his hair was covered with dust and sand, and he was carrying some sand in his hands. He said, I asked Rasulullah, Ya Rasulullah, what is this that you're carrying with you? He said, this is the sand of Karbala. This is the sand in which my grandson Husain will be martyred. And this is the sand that will turn into blood on the day of Ashura. This is mentioned in Musnad Ahmad ibn Hanbal. Yes, the day of Ashura was a day of sadness for Rasulullah sallallahu alayhi wa sallam. It was a day of sadness for the Ahlul Bayt. It was a day of sadness for Fatima al-Zahra alayhi salam. Today, my dear brothers and sisters, is the eve of the 2nd of Muharram. And according to narrations, on a day like this, Imam Hussein arrived to Karbala. Narrations say, historians say that Imam Hussein was passing by in the desert. His horse stopped in the middle of the desert. He changed his horse. He asked for another horse. They brought him another horse. The horse would not move. He asked for a third horse, a fourth horse, a fifth horse. None of his horses moved. Finally, he asked, Ashabi, mismu hadhihi al-ard. What is the name of this land? Someone said, Nainawa. Another said, Al-Taf. Another person said, Al-Ghawariyah. They kept on mentioning various names. The Imam said, no, it has another name, it has a special name. Finally, someone said, Sayyidi, tusamma Karbala. My master, it is called Karbala. فتنفس الصعداء وقال هي كرب وبلاء أصحابي انزلوا فذا محط رحالنا. My companions, this is our land in which we will camp in. This is the land in which we will fight in. This is the land in which our blood will be shedded on. This is the land in which our youth will be massacred. This is the land in which our children will be orphaned. This is the land in which our women will be taken captive. انزلوا فذا محط رحالنا. انزلوا هنا فذا مصرع رجالنا. انزلوا هنا سبي نسائنا. لا حول ولا قوة إلا بالله العلي العظيم. إنا لله وإنا إليه راجعون. نسألك اللهم وندعوك باسمك العظيم الأعظم الأعز الأجل الأكرم يا الله. اللهم لا تدع لنا ذنبا إلا غفرته ولا هما إلا فرجته فرجته، ولا عيبا إلا سترته، ولا خوفا إلا آمنته، ولا رزقا إلا بسطته، ولا شملا إلا جمعته، ولا مرضا إلا شفيته، ولا غائبا إلا حفظته وأدنيته، ولا حاجة من حوائج الدنيا والآخرة لك فيها رضا ولنا فيها صلاح إلا قضيتها ويسرتها يا أرحم الراحمين. ولأرواح المؤمنين والمؤمنات والعلماء والشهداء نقرأ سورة الفاتحة مع الصلوات.